Okay, and welcome to the Games Under Grace podcast. I'm hosting again today. My name is Sam, and I have with me Derek and Malachi. We're all writers for the video game department for geeksundergrace.com, a Christian centered website for anything related to geek culture, games, movies, television, anime, and we also have devotions um,
Board
for
games.
devotions of games. Yeah, and yeah, and into this podcast, we just talk about like the stuff we've been up to, cover a bit of news, and um, do some discussions. And once again, I left that topic to Derek, who always has something to say. Um, before we get into it, Derek, do you want to just bring up what that topic was again?
Well, I've been deep in JRPG land, which we'll get to here in a minute, but I'm getting frustrated with the idea of games just in the last one third kind of going off the rails story wise. And so we're going to talk about which games do this well and do this don't, kind of wrapping up the final conclusion. And, do I need a third boss behind the boss behind the boss that makes no sense? Or, can the last arc and the final villain actually like be something logical and interesting?
Uh, Honestly, there's a lot we could talk about with that.
So
There are
much.
several games I could talk about with our JRPGs in general.
I
Um,
had to do some Googling to remind myself of some plots of some older games.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so we'll just get into uh, our last 2 weeks, I suppose, because we're doing bi-monthly right now. Malachi, do you want to start off?
Yeah, just like we've been playing.
Yeah, basically.
Let's see. It's been oh boy. Yeah, I'm still getting kind of settled into new apartment, new job, and so when I find time to play games, I finally beat Yakuza Like a Dragon. Final playtime just for the campaign ended up being around 65 hours, which to me, as someone who really struggles to stay focused on well anything, felt like a lot until I was politely informed by Derek that I should not play any of the Persona games because they apparently take a long time to play. Maybe I'll get around to those eventually. I mean, who knows how long COVID will last? Eventually, I may be bored enough to do that. But my two highlights for the past 2 weeks will have been I tried out a little bit of VR multiplayer. Again, I've been still getting into VR a little bit and testing the waters in terms of what it has to offer. And I played a bit of Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, which is a lot of fun. I really the applications of multiplayer and VR I think aren't nearly not nearly as explored as they could be, just because a lot of VR is kind of sitting watching your friends mess around with a headset on their face. But Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes takes that to the next level, where basically the player with the headset has to defuse a bomb, and they're the only ones that can see it, and the rest of the players have to give them instructions on how to defuse the bomb based off of a like 18-page manual that comes with the game. It's entertaining because it's extraordinarily subjective. It reminds me about that old statistic about how like eyewitness testimony is like the least valuable because there's like sections of the game that are like you need to push these symbols in this order, and of course one person is going to see the symbol and go, oh, that looks like a tree, and the other person goes, that looks like a tree, and then we've all exploded. And that's how it usually goes. uh, so that was a good time. I like to see a lot more in terms of VR multiplayer. One idea that I've seen thrown around a lot is the idea of one player controlling multiplayer in VR while their players play on different consoles, kind of asymmetrical multiplayer. Anyway, I haven't seen much actually come out in that way, but there's some interesting games I have an eye on for that. The other one I've been playing, I kind of started a few days ago, is Cluster Truck, which I've had on my PS4 for a long time now, and finally got around to touching it. And you know what? I really missed platformers that just took a simple idea and were like, this is all we're going to do. In Cluster Truck, there's a lot of trucks. They all have kind of herd mentality AI where they move across levels in various different patterns, but it's different every time you play it. And you have to kind of leap across the trucks and use them to get to the end of the level. And that's about as simple as it gets. And I don't know what else to say except for the fact that it's it's way more fun than it has any right to be. Um, yeah, I mean that's what I've been playing. It feels really good to go from, I guess, games that are extraordinarily like complicated mechanically or have a lot going on and bring it back to something simple. It is just you jump, you move, you avoid things coming at you. We got a platformer. That's about it. So that one's a good time. I'm hoping to put out a review of that soon, just because I'm actually, it's a nice palate cleanser, I guess. Coming off of a 65-hour game onto something that's like 3 hours. So that's where I'm at. What about y'all?
Um, I guess I'll go next. So, as I mentioned before, uh, because I'm taking a break from the site for the next couple months just to get acquainted with my new job and everything, as well as some personal things. I started out 3 new story. Well, actually, now it's 4 new story games. Only one of them I'm playing all the way through for a review by the time I come back. Actually, hang on, because I need to remind myself what those were again. Um, so the first one was Necrobarista, which I believe uh, is an indie visual novel game. Um, yeah, it's really interesting because it's like it's indie, but at the same time, it doesn't really feel indie because it's basically just another visual novel game, but all the scenes are very cinematic, as it were. Like the camel or the camel, the camel camera has a lot of very dynamic angles uh, in the cutscenes and everything. It's super interesting. It keeps things very lively. I generally kind of have a problem with visual novel games where it's like you're kind of forced to read a lot of text. I know that's not true for every visual novel game. I just know in general it's like you're doing a lot of text reading and there's not that much involvement with it. So I just appreciate Necrobarista for trying to at least um, change it up. So it's like, hey, at least like there's stuff going on the screen to make me at least feel like I'm engaging with the game a little bit, even if I'm just clicking once in a while to skip or to advance text. Um, so that's pretty
Barista
cool.
is the one where you play as the barista and there's all the various different fantasy characters, right? Like, and you kind
Uh,
of hear their different life stories. Am I mixing it up? I remember hearing about a game that was like this.
you might be talking about Valhalla.
That doesn't sound right.
Possibly. I'm
I'll look
not
it up. Don't worry
sure.
about it.
Um,
Sounds fun.
yeah. No. Yeah. Necrobarista is really interesting. Just going off of the first chapter right now. It seems to be really short, but like I said before, there, like I said before, a lot of there's a lot of room to just explore explore wait, did I talk about this before? Oh no. I'm
I don't
having
think
like a
so.
weird feeling of deja vu all of a sudden. No, I don't think so. Anyway, so ba- basically the game doesn't seem to be very long. I checked on how long to beat and it said like 4 to 6 hours I think, even to just complete it 100%. So that's very nice. It seems to be a easily digestible game too, uh, where I can just play for an hour, half an hour to an hour, and still make like pretty good progress on it. Um, Although actually, just recently they added a new episode to it, so I'm not sure if it's actually done necessarily. But I'm pretty excited so far. The premise is very interesting. Basically, it's like um, you're following the story of people who work at this coffee shop that's also like a key point um, where the dead can arrive to. Uh, so and like
Well, that's not what I
it
was
sets
talking
up
about.
this.
Now
Sorry.
you piqued my interest. So that's not what I was thinking of, but now you piqued my interest. That sounds interesting.
Yeah. Um, the first character you meet, it's just like a guy who showed up. He looks fairly young, which is already pretty interesting. That's like, okay, so it probably wasn't natural causes, if not sickness. And turns out it, and as it turns out, it probably was actually like someone murdered him. So because now his goal is to like try and figure out who it was that murdered him, and he only has 48 hours to figure it out before he has to move on. And he, I think, very realistically freaks out about every part of it, and kind of has to be calmed down from it. The main character, the female uh, coffee shop coffee shop attendant, she's very snarky. She has a lot of attitude, but it's I like her character a lot. It it's weird. It kind of feels like, it almost feels like I'm watching like a short anime series, like a 12 episode anime series or something like that. Where it's like there's this very interesting premise. There seems to be a lot of details in the works, but you don't really know everything yet, and you kind of just have to figure out as the story goes along as well, and put pieces together. There's also a small interactive component where while you're watching a chapter, certain words are highlighted, and then at the end of the chapter, the game will ask you a series of questions of like, which of these terms stuck out to you most in this particular for this question, rather, and you just have to pick like which ones those are, and those will actually give you like points to unlock more lore that you can read in between chapters as well, that give a little bit of backstory around each characters, and like their situations and stuff like that. So it does also encourage to go back to previous chapters um, if you need to like collect more points in anything. Although I'm sure like if you were very careful and you knew like which ones you wanted to unlock right away, you could do that. You could do it all in one run. But I'm not looking to efficiently uh, do like an efficient RTA or anything like that. So I'm just gonna take it at my own pace for now. Um, and then the next game, and this is was Sense, a cyberpunk ghost story. This was the indie visual novel game that caused a bit of a stir, because there were people trying to get it delisted from Nintendo's eShop because of like what I would say is like arguably sexually sensitive artwork of female characters, and like uh only playing for about an hour so far. I can say, yeah, I do see that argument being valid, because almost every woman in the game is depicted uh very provocatively, with like certain fetish equipment and stuff like that. I'm talking about it as if it's like an MMO, but I mean, I
It
don't
sounds
know,
kind of
like,
par for the course for that. Yeah.
yeah, but at the same time, it's like it's still somewhat cyberpunk. Like, to be frank, that is one particular way that could be taken, where it's like, um, men and women can now like cybernetically enhance themselves in every way, if they so choose to. Although it seems to be that like it's mostly women in this particular game. So again, I understand why there could be an argument made that it's it's visually too sensitive for um, like underage underage or minors picking up the game if they saw it on the eShop. But I mean, to be perfectly honest, it's only like it's pretty front loaded. I apologize for the pun. That's not intended in any way, but um, it's really only in like I would argue like the first 5 minutes. Honestly, it doesn't even take that long before like the horror part of it starts. And uh, I mean, to be perfectly honest, like it's not even necessarily that scary. It's just more tense. And it's because like I just generally do not do very well with horror games. Even a game like Sense, where like it has a lot more of a color palette than most horror games do. It still feels really tense when I'm dealing with like uh, Chinese ghosts who have a certain grudge, and that does seem to be the case in this one. It's weird because it's like it seems to be a lot of these indie horror games lately, with games like Devotion and Detention, where like there's a lot of influences from Chinese or Southeast Asian like horror mythology, um, or ghost mythology rather. So it's at least in that part, it's fairly interesting. Although I wouldn't want it to be like every indie horror game moving forward because it's already starting to feel a little oversaturated with that. But then again, like um, a lot of these a lot of these indie developers, who are now just like releasing games from these countries, they're just getting access to a lot of these assets. So at the same time, I don't want to put it down by saying like I'm kind of tired of the same thing, but at the same time, I don't want it to be an issue of oversaturation. Um, but yeah, it seems interesting so far. I remember looking at the Steam store page that it's influenced by the Clock Tower series as well as Fatal Frame. It definitely feels like that. It feels closer to the Clock Tower series, where it's like you kind of have to, where you have to like find items, pick them up, and and try to figure out where they go. While at the same time, you'll have to dodge ghosts as they'll periodically try to attack you. Um, although I've kind of really only been coming up against like scripted events, nothing that's like part of the game itself where it just happens randomly. Um, so it seems interesting so far, but um, who's to say? But again, I honestly don't think it's gonna be as bad as people make it out to be, unless something happens at like the final hour of the game, and it all of a sudden I'm just blasted with something so terribly like insensitive that I'm just like, yeah, don't play this game. But we'll see. Don't quote me out of context with that one.
Something you've reminded me of about this is that I don't know, I don't have data on Switch users, but the way the Switch eShop presents itself, if you just browse for games, is that it's like Nintendo Kids games, and then it's like anime porn. Like they really, if you look through the like just listings, and I really need to set mine. That I have a 6-year-old that has a Switch Lite. I just have her in airplane mode, but I really need to set the parental controls so that the content is filtered. But like, I don't know if like these devs actually like if Switch is like the new spot for these types of games, these like M-rated visual novels, or if that's like just the way the eShop kind of doesn't really filter what it shows compared to like the PlayStation Shop that kind of has more curation by Sony itself. But that's how it comes across every time I boot it up.
I would wager that's more just because of what kind of games the Switch is like powered towards, I guess. Like natural age JRPGs and the like would fit more naturally, like fit more into the Switch. And also fan bases, I think people that play on the Switch tend to have more of an interest in games that are like that. You have either the kid gamers or I guess you call them weeaboos, for lack of a better term, people who really enjoy games from Southeast Asian areas. And so that's kind of a natural slip into that. But yeah, it is kind of jarring. I know what you mean. The Switch eShop goes from Mario to just, oh, I didn't know they had that on there. We're going to move somewhere else.
I mean, to be perfectly fair, like that's kind of always been the case, at least with portables. I mean, Derek, as I'm sure you're well aware by now, there are a lot of JRPGs as well as visual novel games on portables, and I think it's just because like it makes sense for Japan's market to have those games available because that's what people are usually doing. They're gaming on the go. It's a fairly well known fact within gaming culture that for Japan, there's not really a need. There hasn't been much of a need to play games at home. Usually, people are out because they're working or you know they don't want to be at home or something like that. So they're usually playing on portable. So it's like, well, what games work well for that? JRPGs because you know you can play like a little bit at a time, save or do a quick save, and then play it later. And visual novels work the exact same way. A lot of those saving features where you can kind of just checkpoint uh, where you are in the story, much like a bookmark. That's all because it's for the convenience of people in Japan who play those types of games. That being said, I understand the frustration having to deal with that on Nintendo's eShop, but also that was kind of a thing with the Nintendo Wii eShop as well. Uh, and it's just like, um, it just seems like Nintendo just has no filter when it comes to uh, publishing games that want to go onto the eShop at all. It's just one of those things. I think in general, just because like Sony has a bigger stake in the global market, that's why they're choosing now to um, focus more on like keeping a cleaner slate, I suppose, for their online shop. Um, that being said, it still doesn't really make any sense because there's a lot of studios that uh, require finding sales on all platforms as much as possible just to in order to continue operating. Um, I would argue that like if they wanted to drive more sales, maybe they should try other other types of genres to see if they can find success somewhere else. That's just me personally, but they got to do what they got to do, and I can't really force them to try otherwise. Unless they ask me, in which case I would say, yeah, try different stuff. Maybe move away from the stuff that's getting your games blocked. But yeah, and I'll quickly wrap up because I don't want to take up too much time. So one other game I tried out was Paradise Killer. I I believe this has actually been covered by someone on our website, or maybe it hasn't, and I'm remembering wrong. But
I think I edited that article, so it's possible.
yeah, um, yeah, Paradise Killer is another indie game. I suppose you can sort of call it like a Danganronpa slash Phoenix Wright mashup game, but with Western art as opposed to by a Japanese developer. So the premise is, and forgive me because it's kind of complicated, and even I don't really understand everything fully. I just booted up for like a few minutes, honestly, just to check it out real quick because I heard a lot of people actually praise this game, so I was really curious. Um, but basically you take control of a character named Lady Lovedies, who was exiled for some reason, and apparently for like hundreds of years. And then she's actually brought out of exile because a council of super entities that control when the world needs to be destroyed and then reset to a new world. This council have all been mysteriously killed at the same time. So she's brought out of exile because she's basically a private investigator, and I guess she's the only one available because they basically just tell you straight up like you're the only person who can solve this, Lady Love Dies. And you just go, okay, I guess I better solve who did this. And that's basically the premise. For the gameplay itself, you pretty much just have to walk around, find clues, interrogate people, uh, figure out who was a witness, decide who's the most suspicious, and then report back and decide, yeah, I think this person is the one who did it, and just prove that they were the ones who did it in court. Um, so it's very interesting, and because I personally haven't played a Danganronpa game before. I just personally I'm not a real fan of the art style, and the story itself didn't really grasp me in any way from any of the trailers or even reading up on it or anything like that. But I mean, I don't know. Uh, Depending how I think about on what I think about of this game, maybe that'll change my mind and I'll actually give it a shot. Uh, it's very interesting. It's very abstract. Like in terms of like a Western indie game, it definitely feels uh like a Western indie game for sure. With all these very abstract characters, very garish, outlandish designs. It kind of reminds me of a web comic that I read a while back called um I think it's called "You Must Kill 6 Billion Demons," which sort of gives a similar feel, although completely different in art style and everything, of course. But it's just like the story and the characters themselves are very abstract. There's a lot of lore that can be explored within the world itself, and a lot of development that's obviously meant uh, to take place as the story itself unfolds. Um, it's very interesting, but I don't have too much exposure. It's really only these two that I can think of, where it's like it's kind of interesting seeing these very abstract stories with with a more explicit expression of a medium like web comics and video games, I suppose. I don't know if this makes any sense. Like it's still very confusing. Like I don't know a whole lot already. So
Well, let me
uh,
know how it is because I remember where I heard it from. It's on one of my favorite YouTubers' top 20 of the year list. So I've heard a lot of good things about Paradise Killer. I hope you'll end up enjoying it because it sounds very odd and abstract, but like in a good way.
yeah. Um, I was listening to a podcast that Jason Schreier from formerly of Kotaku rather on his podcast, like one of their co-hosts was talking about it as well, and she said she really liked it too. I apologize, I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but she sounded really excited about it, so I am a bit more interested in it now. Um, and then finally, the last game I played was the Silver Case, and this is the game I wanted to cover for my review. And I talked about it before, but just to recap, this was one of the first games created by Suda51, who works with Grasshopper Manufacturer right now. And it's I started on it on multiple occasions, so I kind of know how to play the first chapter fairly quickly now. But basically, the premise of it is um, a a former serial killer in Japan is has apparently who died has apparently come back to life, uh and it's um and like uh he kind of he kind of proclaims as if like he's some sort of supernatural power that like he's going to cause a wave of destruction again. And like that sounds already pretty out there. Except the thing is like it's set behind like this sort of gritty Japanese crime genre backdrop where like in in the first chapter you're introduced to like two characters who were formerly partners of the Tokyo police who managed to like who managed to take down this serial killer, and then they went off in different ways. It's like it plays out kind of like a crime drama where it's like where it's like one of them is like he's still working in the force because he wants to, but has like lost faith in the system, and then the other guy is part of like basically a black ops cleaner squad where it's just like, okay, this is a pretty heinous crime, but we don't actually want to we don't actually want to fill out all the paperwork, so we just want you to get rid of the problem straight up, and we'll just take care of the rest behind black tape. It's really funky. Like it's one of those things where it's like, if you played a Suda 51 game, like some of his earlier stuff, not a lot of the new stuff right now, it's very it feels very familiar. Like if you played Killer 7 or even the first No More Heroes, it goes for that type of feel. Like it um, it feels somewhat abstract but very adult, where it doesn't play a lot of things for laughs. It's all treated very seriously. It it has sort of a Pulp Fiction type of vibe to it, um, and yeah, I don't know what else to say other than like it's still just like one of those things where it's like I'm very interested in the story itself. I just don't know why I haven't brought myself to actually finish the game. But yeah, like I'm very excited. It's it's really interesting. Like I'm already kind of hooked into the plot because it's just like, you know, what's the deal with the serial killer? Why did they make him sound like he has like supernatural powers? Like they constantly refer to him as a demon, and nobody cracks a joke at it. It's basically treated as if like, wait, do people actually believe he's a demon or not? Like I still really don't know. Um, but yeah, it's really cool. I wish I had more to say or I could elaborate on it more, but I mean like for all these games they play mostly the same, and you're mostly going through text for all these games too. So
Sounds like an interesting collection. I might have to add a couple of them to my own.
yeah, it's
It
really
seems like you've got murder on the brain this week, is what I got from those four. A
no,
lot of
Right.
killing,
that's not
a lot of
Isolation.
true.
dead people.
It just happens to be these games in general. I mean that's the thing too, though, right? Like if it isn't about if a visual novel game isn't about life or a plot to destroy the world or romance, it's probably going to be a crime drama, really. And
Well, like three
that's just
genres, really.
and that's kind of basically the central theme of to all these games I've been playing. So, uh, oh yeah, and I did say I want to talk about Hades, but I don't know. Like, Derek, did you play Hades at all?
It was probably the week before. I've beaten it 10 times, so I've gotten the epilogue. But there's a true ending that I'm not even gonna mess with. Shelley Waltar on our staff is going for it. She said she's 75 hours in and she hasn't gotten it yet.
Okay.
And from my googling, the internet doesn't know how to do it. Like there's no like walkthrough. Like here's what you need to do to get it. So once I got the like ending, which you have to beat it 10 times for that, I put it away. But it took me about 25 hours to do that. But I was playing on easy mode. Um, but yeah, you said you're stuck on the final boss, right?
Yeah. So last night I actually reached him. I actually reached him 3 times. The first time I didn't expect to win. The build wasn't super great, and I wasn't putting out a lot of damage. So I just wanted to see like how much of it I could learn. Unfortunately, he destroyed me pretty quickly, so I had to just try and get back to him again. The second time went a little bit better, but it was really the third time where I was really close. Like I think I had him very close to death. Like I really only needed like 2 or 3 hits, and I just died at the last second. And unfortunately, it was just like I was too reckless. I unfortunately had gotten into a habit of pressing dash and the attack button at the same time, just so I could get the dash strike out as fast as possible. And unfortunately, that caused me to just eat a lot of damage to the face when I really shouldn't have. It really sucks too because I actually had a really good I had a really good Doom and Weak combo actually. There was a duo power that I got uh, that causes more Doom damage as long as I stack weakness on my target. So that actually really helped me out. It actually um, it got me through most of the bosses like fairly quickly, with even past the third boss, which is probably the one I still struggle with before the final boss.
I agree. He's a significantly harder than the first two.
Yeah,
They.
yeah, but yeah, I do have a feeling like a few more runs and I'll probably get it. Because I know what to expect now. Because like I got that far into the fight where I nearly had it, so it's just more like at that point, like I said before, I gotta play more seriously and just uh, be more conservative, and uh, just just not die, basically. So,
Should I give you suggest my suggestion of the easiest way to win, or you want to figure it out for yourself?
uh, I suppose so, but I don't know. Yeah, go for it.
Suppose. All right. Now I beat him first with a spear, but in my opinion, I beat him with every weapon. In my opinion, this is the easiest way to make a run. The gun is the best weapon, but not because of the auto fire. It's the special that's the best part. There is an upgrade for the special. Now you have to get it, of course, where the special makes a huge bubble, but it also hurts you. And if you get that dataless upgrade, and then you just put everything on the special, you can pretty much just camp on the third and fourth boss. You can just hide and just shoot that thing.
Oh, okay. Huh. Yeah, actually, I don't think I've had that upgrade come up. I like I said, I try to avoid using the gun right now. I'm
Well,
basically just I'm basically just following with whatever weapon gives me more darkness
I,
each run. So
well, eventually it'll be the gun. So,
yeah.
the first time I won with a spear, and the way I did that is I always forgot that that you could even do the spin attack. So the first time it came up, I think it's called flurry jab, where you hold it down, and rather than doing a spin attack, you just keep attacking, like you just
Hmm.
keep poking constantly.
Yeah.
Once when I get that and I just upgrade the attack, it's very easy for me to just and also just standard enemies. Once you start doing it to them, they can't really move; they get stuck.
Hmm.
And so it really made the last area two a lot easier because it was easy to pin enemies. So you could
Yeah,
just hide in a
for
corner.
sure.
You could just hide in a corner when they came at you. You could just stick them.
Oh well, wait.
So
You were playing on easy though. Did you have to deal with armor at all in the third dungeon?
my understanding of yeah, you have armor. My understanding of the easy mode is it just reduces the damage I take. So
Oh, okay.
the
Oh yeah,
enemies
yeah,
take
yeah.
the same
Okay.
amount of damage of armor, and every time you die, I take less damage. So by the end, I had a lot of damage resistance. But the like stuff like that, like the animations of sticking enemies, would be the same.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I might try that. I'm gonna have one. I'm gonna have a couple more goes after we finish up. So, I'll see if that works or not. But yeah, and did you have anything else, Derek? Or
Well, I can tell you what I played this week.
yeah.
In a true test of endurance, I have beaten Tales of Zestiria, which is the largest. Is dichotomy the word? The largest split I've ever seen in a game between quality of characters and story and kind of art and everything else. The actual gameplay, the combat, just like quality of life stuff was terrible. I've never seen like the characters and the story kept me in it, but I'll just give you a couple examples of how dumb this game was.
Okay.
The main problem with the combat was just that, well, two things. The timing was very, very vague. There's no camera. So, and I kept wanting to, there's a camera in the overworld. And I kept wanting to move that, which actually gives orders to your allies. So I kept giving orders on accident. But also, there are several buttons that you had to do in right combination, but if you do the wrong thing, it'll do something else. So, for example, to do a mystic art, you have to have three of some resource. I think it's called BG. I don't even know what that stands for, honestly, but you have to push R2 and circle at the same time. If you push R2 alone, it takes one BG away and does a different move. But because the timing is so terrible, quite often I was doing not the thing I wanted to do, and then I couldn't because I used up the resource. I wasn't able to do the actual move I was trying to do, and it was pretty much like this the whole time. If you've played Tales of Berseria, Berseria also has pretty bad combat, but Zestiria is far far worse. It was so much worse.
Yeah, they're like I played both Zestiria and Berseria both like a little bit. I think like I think Berseria was a little better with the tutorial, I suppose. But the problem with both of them
Yeah.
is that they just kind of explain. They kind of just give you a bunch of text for the combat tutorial, and that's basically it. And I think it's just like unfortunately, they both just do too much, and you're
Yes, I
just
agree
kind of going
100%.
like, wait, what? I don't even like it's weird to say that I was less confused with Tales of Symphonia, and I got lost in that game very easily, like several times, just because like there was no way to like there was no way to like get a hint of just like, wait, where am I supposed to go again? But even then, it's like I still got farther in that game than with any of the newer games, just because it was just like, okay, okay, in combat, I just have to remember fighting game inputs, and that's basically it. Like you're good.
So you did point out the one good thing Zestiria gets right, which is if you just talk to your companion, she always tells you where to go. But the combat, it was pretty terrible. Equipment has these skills that you can stack. I mean, I'm a mathematician, and these equations were too annoying for me to mess with. I did it once because there was one boss that could petrify you, and there's no cure, like there's no item to cure petrification in the whole game, even though this boss can petrify. You have to guard at exactly the right moment, except remember the timing sucks. So I
Oh
figured out the
wow.
stacking eventually. I found out the hard way that every time you fast travel in the game, it costs like 1,000 gold, and so I didn't
I
even notice that
remember
was happening.
that. Yeah.
And then lastly, so when you get points that you can assign to make combat suck less, basically, there's like battle actions that will like, hey, you automatically dodge in this case, or you automatically do this. In which case, I'm just like, why am I even playing? Um, and so one of the actions was called half and half, and it said inflicted damage is reduced by half. Use it only if you really want it. I was like, well, yeah, I don't. I want easy mode. So I turned that on. I realized 3/4 of the way through the game, I was doing half damage, not the enemies. So even though I had it on easy mode, I was winning fights, but they were taking forever. And I finally realized why, because apparently they meant damage I inflict, not inflicted to me.
Oh my goodness.
But why though? Why is that in
But
the game?
I don't know. But I finally beat it. I had to do some googling with the last boss because all of a sudden, I mean, I had it on easy mode the whole time, but then the second form of the final boss I could not beat, and then finally I figured out like there was one special art you had to use, and after that it was a piece of cake. But I had to do some googling to figure that out.
Oh wow. Dang.
which is annoying. I feel like a boss fight should be like, hey, maybe you can learn the trick and like get better, like if you play it over and over. But it was like either impossible or if you know this one secret skill, then it was just nothing.
Well, I mean, like, I don't think you even have to go that far. The fact that both those games have auto battle functions is bad enough already. So
That's what I did. Is I played Tales of Hearts R on my Vita, which is a good Tales game, combat wise, because it's a lot simpler. While that game was on auto battle, if a boss if it was a boss, the auto battle really wasn't good enough, so I'd play those. And then anytime it was just a random encounter, I would just put it on auto battle,
mm-hmm.
which is depressing. However, the game, the story was really good. The actual like plot was fairly generic, but the characters were really good. A lot of good emotional moments, a lot of cool cutscenes. I really liked the main characters. There's an anime of it that has a little bit of Berseria mixed in, so I'm going to watch that because one of our other staffers, Jimmy Rice, said he just gave up 12 hours in because he couldn't stand the combat. So if the anime is decent, I might tell him to watch that.
Oh yeah,
Don't play
I
the
don't know.
PC anime, of course.
Say it again, Malachi.
Yeah, just if you can't hack playing the game, just watch the anime instead. Easier solution.
I mean, it does suck. It's like it's almost a game where I'd say just watch it instead. But the Tales games kind of live or die on the skits, and like that's what I like to see. If you go back to like why people like Final Fantasy 15, it's because the party has like relationships, and Tales has been doing that. Tales has been doing that for a long time with skits, and the skits were really good. Except that the equipment stuff was so complicated. At least 3 of the skits I watched was like a meta skit of one character explaining to another how equipment works.
Oh my
because
goodness.
they knew that you probably had no idea what you were doing. So like if your game is so dumb that you have to like have the characters explain to each other how it works because you made it so complicated, like fix it. So and actually I realized recently those are the last 2 games that have been made for the past 5 years. It's been 5 years since Berseria came out. So Tales of Arise is the next game in the series after those. So I really hope they've done a lot of soul searching in the past 5 years. I want it to be good. I mean, I really do like the series.
Yeah.
I've played them now, but yeah. And then I'm going with the backlog strategy of doing all the big games first. So after I beat that, I started Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus, which is like the only Falcom game that isn't Legend of Heroes or Ys. And it's very jarring the extent to which this game is Trails of Cold Steel slapped onto a Persona clone. Like I get it's the same developer, and so it's the same graphics engine. So the fact that
actually, Derek, hang on, because Malachi's camera seems to be roboting like crazy right now.
He looks okay from. Oh, I see. I think he's just twisting it.
Hang on. Okay, sorry about that. Just a little hiccup with one of our cameras. We're just gonna have to push forward for it now. So, Derek, continue where you're saying.
Yeah, so I'm taking the backlog strategy of doing big games first. So I started Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus, which is probably the only Falcom game that isn't Ys or Legend of Heroes, but it was not. I'm not sure who published it, but it wasn't Xseed or NIS America. And I cannot believe the extent to which this game is. They took Trails of Cold Steel and slapped it onto a Persona clone. Like it's weird. I mean, it's jarring. Yeah, the graphics look the same because it's the same graphics engine. That's not surprising. But to give you an example, I'm actually going to try to screen share here.
This is about the point where all of Discord just falls apart. So, oh, there it is. Never mind.
No, don't do that. Okay.
Ah, I see.
Oh, Derek, I think you muted yourself.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. You can. Well, now you're seeing my Discord screen. Hold on. You still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the character on the left is Toa Herschel from Trails of Cold Steel 3. And she's supposed to be from like German descent. Well, I mean, it's all fake cities and names, but it's basically a European setting, and her last name is Herschel. This is Toa Kokonoe on the right from Tokyo Xanadu. It's the exact same first name, exact same character model. All they did was put glasses on her and put the hair in the front, the ponytail in the front, and she's supposed to be Japanese now. but it has the same
Right.
name. Like, what is going on? That is literally the laziest thing I've ever seen in a video game.
That's incredible. I'm impressed that
To
you picked up on it, honestly.
to be perfectly fair, Neon Falcon, the developers of these series, they seem to just not have too much money. So I think it's like
You could at least change your name. All you got to do is type in different letters.
I don't know. Maybe they're just like we don't have enough money for name changes. Just keep it the same.
Even if you're gonna use the same character model, don't pretend she's German and Japanese and give her the same name.
No,
The
no, no.
letters
It's
are too
fine.
expensive.
Anyway, I beat the first chapter, and it's more of an action RPG, which is fine. It has really basic combat, which after Zestiria, I'm so happy about that. Like, I understand what the buttons do, so that doesn't bother me. And I beat the first chapter, and now that I'm in the second one, I'm starting to feel like, okay, this is its own game. It has its own kind of like um, mythology. But for the first game, for the first like couple hours, I was like, this is just a Trails of Cold Steel clone. It was so weird. But I've also never played the East series, so I don't know how much they kind of rip off themselves there. I've only played the Trail series, which is one of my favorite RPGs. So it was a little weird. The jury's still out. I mean, this game didn't get exactly great reviews, but and by the way, I noticed it was $12, not $9, but it was cheap enough. And so far, it's I don't know, it's doing okay. We'll see if I stick with it.
Sounds like y'all are getting a lot more down than I am. I might pick up something fancy and story wise next week instead of just jumping on exploding trucks. But that's my personal life, I guess.
That's fine.
Well, our semester starts on the 1st, so it's all downhill from there.
Yeah, and I'm about to not have as much time soon, so I'm really gonna have to prioritize what I want to do.
I'm working 50 hours a week, so that plays into it a little bit.
I probably will have to as well. So okay, um, and so now we'll just move on into news. First on the docket is we have our first major franchise release or sequel rather, Hitman 3, uh, which I mean I don't know. It doesn't seem to be. There seem to be some issues with its initial launch, but I mean that's kind of to be expected at this point. I shouldn't say we should be used to it, but at the same time, it's that's usually how it is nowadays with these bigger releases. I'm not gonna say it's a I'm not gonna say it's a Cyberpunk, it's or a Fallout 76 issue, or even an Anthem issue. None of like Hitman 3's release is nowhere near as bad as any of those games. Um, so sorry guys who wanted to pull out their oh boy 2020 season 2 is starting all over again. Um, I think this is just more like par for the course, really, for Hitman 3. This article from Kotaku, which I guess arguably could be considered a little clickbaity, but that's sort of the nature of journalism anyway. But it does go into details about the launch itself, primarily arguing an issue with the persistent internet connection. But I think that's I think like if it's just performance issues, then that's to be expected when you require a persistent online connection. Just another example of why you really shouldn't require that from the start. Although I understand why it's being pushed and what it serves to be used as within the new Hitman series. But that's always been a thing with the previous two games as well. So again, sounds par for the course here.
I felt like the Kotaku article was trying to kind of drum up drama where there wasn't one. You really got to be a little bit skittish to be the next big game after Cyberpunk, the next AAA release. And I felt like they were just, I don't know, trying to keep it going. The before reading that, article, like from hearing from people who've played Hitman, it hasn't been. It's just been, this is fantastic, and the reviews seem to line up with the fact that it's been being pretty well received.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that it shouldn't really that it should still be addressed if there are issues, because there is a point to there is a reason to point those out, in any case, because you should, if people want to know, um, if there are any initial issues with a game before they purchase it, they have a right to know about them.
Well, sure, but I feel like those go in the review, not in a separate. Oh boy, here we go again. Piece.
Yeah, I mean, again, I will say the Kotaku article that we're going off of here, it it is it is a little, um, it is a little predatory with how it's like, it's trying to just follow up with honestly the big disaster that has been Cyberpunk 2077's release. But at the same time, like I do think it's still important to just point these out anyway. But yeah, like
It can be a bit nitpicky, but like for me personally, I think, at least I hope, that the Cyberpunk debacle and how many other bad launches we've had from big AAA studios will push people to actually critique them enough and push for meaningful change. Like, yeah, absolutely, it's a bit clickbaity, and I personally, I'm biased, but I really enjoy IO Studios. I think they're doing a good thing with Hitman series, but I also don't like persistently online issues. I also don't like when games are, rushed in, and when there's not as much of a listening to the player base and what they really do enjoy. And so, while maybe this article is a bit nitpicky, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that instead of going, at least it wasn't Cyberpunk, we can take a moment to be like, well, what do we demand out of these games that we're now paying $70 a pop for? That's just my hope. Is that it seems like we're too quick to sweep things under the rug as just, oh, that was a bad release, that happens, instead of just going, let's take a larger look at the industry and like consider how these kinds of releases come about. More of a soapbox thing, but worth thinking about as we're looking at new game releases moving forward.
yeah, and if you read further down the article, it kind of just it kind of hits on what seems to be a touchy issue for this writer, where it's like that classic, one guy, or rather, several one guys on the internet say, runs fine for me, I don't see what the problem is. And it's just like, yeah, sure, but it, like, that experience is not going to be the same for everyone. Like, um that's the point of testing, is to, like, try and catch as many these as possible, but at the same time you're not going to be able to catch everything, which is sort of the point of day one patches. So it's like, you know not uh I think some of these can be avoided, but it's just because of, it's just like some of these, I would say are consequences of common practices for video games in general that should be evaluated. Um, that should be evaluated, but at the other time, it's like, you have to like you have to like pick and choose which ones are the ones that are actually concerning. But then again, it's like, you know it's not as interesting to read if it just lists, these are the issues with Hitman 3 uh, currently at the time of writing this article. It's not very enticing. Uh, so it's sort of like, you have to, like, um, what is it? What is it? Glorify the truth a little bit, or mix in like a bit of a lie, or and like dress it up. Any of those of what I just said would work.
Well,
But
sure. I
yeah,
mean, at the same time, you can nitpick, but it is also worth. I agree, definitely. There is a hype train of I put it like a fine balance where you can praise what AAA studios are doing well while also being careful to critique it, because there definitely is the kind of journalism where it's just let's jump on the big studio that's putting something out. And I think there's a place for both of them where there's a genuine critique saying, hey, this is an industry wide practice and we need to stop, but also being like, hey, IO is doing something really good here, and we can also praise the aspects of the game that are really groundbreaking. I for one, I'm excited for it. I haven't played Hitman 3 yet, but I think IO's puts out some of the most innovative level design I've seen in years, and so if it's got more of that, I'm excited. So
Oh no, yeah, for sure. I mean, like, in terms of like, uh, in terms of like, open action stealth games, like the biggest ones we have are, what is it? The Tom Clancy Ghost series, if I remember correctly, and Hitman. Whether we'll see another Metal Gear Solid game is still up in the air. Who's to say?
I hope
I
not.
don't know about that
This
one,
is without
but
Kojima.
yeah, but like the new Hitman series and the Tom Clancy Ghost series have definitely proven that, like, hey, there are other studios that are offering really good stealth action experiences for the people who enjoy those games. But yeah, I don't know. That's really about it. And I think that'll be, well, hopefully it'll be, but I'm sure it won't be the last. This won't be the last article we'll be seeing this year. Because I mean, at the same time, this is going to be a year of trials where uh, more video game companies will be trying to push out products that probably were intended for last year. So we'll have to see and just kind of observe like how we react to them. As far as I can tell, I don't think anyone anyone within our personal circle has reacted to anything like this. So I guess good job on us in that regard. And then the next news piece regarding the Xbox Live Gold subscription pricing. Uh, Back in 2020 or 20 back on the 22nd of this year, um, and and just after 14 hours, immediately updated with, "Hey, so I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, but hey, so we were thinking about doubling the price of a yearly subscription for Xbox Live Gold. Uh, Fellow gamers have made it very clear that nobody wants to pay for that at all. So, you know what? We're just gonna keep it the way it is. Um, and we're gonna do our best to not bring any more bad publicity at all." Um, which is basically what they said here in this update to the original posting that they had. And actually, something I didn't notice until like reading it again. Uh, they said they will also not require an Xbox Live Gold membership if you want to play any free to play games. So hey, that's also good as well. Um, yeah, and that's pretty much it. That's the entirety of the story, really. Because originally it was just going to be uh, the yearly subscription is going to be doubled, and then they ran that back after many angry messages sent to them. I'm sure. Yeah, I don't know. Like,
The only correct thing they did here was they announced it without just doing it, right? If they had just hiked it one day, like,
yeah,
man, it would be so much worse. But on the other hand, it's like like I'm happy that gamers can kind of vote with their wallet there. I mean, obviously it's good for all of us if they didn't hike it up. But are they never going to be able to do it now? Like, I guess maybe they shouldn't have doubled it. Maybe they should have just tried a couple bucks and seen how it went. But
Oh, I'm
like,
sure they'll push it up again. I mean, that's what Sony did with their subscription as well, and I think everyone just basically had to take it with that one.
I feel like there's a small difference that Xbox has really spent a long time, like the past, I feel like 6 or 7 years, they've really tried to cultivate kind of fan adoration that they really did not have when they first started. And meanwhile, Sony's just kind of more and more not giving a crap about users. And so I feel like Xbox has a little bit more stake in like image. And this is I'm speaking as somebody who refused to own an Xbox for a long time and has followed Sony since Final Fantasy VII. Just recently, I feel like Xbox's like social media accounts and like their just attitude about things has really been more Google less Apple, if that makes sense. And Sony has kind of turned into an Apple like, well, you need to have our product, so deal with it.
Yeah, this
Uh,
reminds me a lot of the whole deal with DRM on the original Xbox One, where they did this exact same thing. They announced a bunch of stuff at one conference that basically everyone roundly went, Sony destroyed them because the PS4 was, worth like or cost $100 less. And Xbox was like, we're putting DRM on the discs where you can't give them to your friends. And they rolled it back to 24 hours again. It seemed like a very uniquely Microsoft problem. But I agree. I think they're seeing themselves in a place where Sony has been soundly doing very well in the console wars and is continuously like, I don't know, PS5 and Xbox Series X is a bit of a toss up. But I think they do exist in a place where, they only have so many exclusives. The Game Pass is doing a lot to curry good favor, but they really do need that. And so I kind of wonder now, last time Xbox was the original ones in the market to make online cost money, and PlayStation followed suit. So I'm gonna be curious now to see if perhaps Sony will be the next ones. Things might have switched places in the market because Sony knows that they could do this possibly because people might not be willing to go over to Microsoft. I don't know. We'll see. I guess games are getting more expensive, so it makes some degree of sense that online would also get more expensive eventually.
Not really in the conversation here. I mean, in terms of like power, but Switch's online service is $20 a year. Like, come on.
well, I mean, like I just hold a different opinion altogether with this, where it's just like, personally, I don't think you should have to pay for a subscription just to play online for any
I agree.
console.
Yeah.
Like it's really counterintuitive with the fact that like we already have to pay for internet connection monthly, and then it's like you're basically being told, okay, now you have to pay us just so we can allow you to play online on these consoles. And it's like, well, I mean, the problem is they can do that because you're using their device. That's the thing, right? Um, and they can do that because they're essentially just selling you a. Oh my goodness, sorry, I didn't mean to get into this so seriously, but they're basically selling you a glorified computer that's set up as a gaming device. That's the thing. Um, and I
But it's
mean,
feeling more and more like you're leasing the device. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
basically, you hardly own anything.
yeah,
Between subscribing online and then like digital content kind of be really being theirs that you're borrowing even though you paid for it.
yeah.
Like
I
it
mean,
feels like
like
the whole thing's a loop.
if if we really want to get cynical about this, the console is your down payment, the online subscription is your rent, and then every game that you buy are your utilities costs. Uh,
Yeah,
You
so
just
there you
ruined
go.
my whole weekend.
but I mean, it's true, right? Like that's the thing. It's like uh, like that's why I'm like it's really difficult for me to really justify wanting to pick up another console because no matter what type of game exclusive that I might really want, like there's just too much um about like needing to utilize like everything on a console that's just like I may as well just save up a little more money and just invest in a gaming PC instead. Uh, because
Because then you
I
know it's
see no
good.
reason to pay for online. Like I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Now that being said, I understand I understand the reasoning why some people would want to rather just get a console. I do understand that part. It's more of like a sake of convenience, separation, I suppose. But on the other hand, like um, I don't like I don't know. It still just doesn't sit well with me. Like really, the biggest thing is like really the only thing that just drives me away from getting a console is the online payment. The only reason why I pay for Switch Online is just so I can play Smash Bros. Online. And to be perfectly honest, I still haven't really done that because, oh man, Nintendo's online online servers are really terrible with their connections. To
They're
be
not good.
perfectly honest,
No.
uh, and that's a whole other issue that I cannot get into right now. That's a whole other thing and a whole other battle I would have to fight with people on the internet if anyone was watching our podcast. Maybe we can talk about that in a future episode. But it's a
It's
lot
a
of
big can
technical
of
stuff.
worms. I
So
agree. Yeah.
yeah, but well, actually, I suppose I'll do a little shameless self promotion. If you do want to learn about um, why that's a huge issue, you can read my recent article released last week at this time about getting into fighting games, where there's actually a small section where I actually talk about um, how wired connections wired connections are honestly the best connection you can have for online gaming, bar none. Sorry, wireless warriors, you are actively nerfing yourself. I'm sorry to say.
Especially in fighting games.
Yes, absolutely. It's very pertinent to fighting games as well. Although there are still also other issues on top of that, which I didn't get into. Um, that's actually for a future article as well, but that could also be another discussion. Um, but yeah, like I guess this is still a net positive, or mm, not a net positive. Like at least this wasn't a net negative for people who enjoy playing on Xbox. So that's all I'm gonna say about that now. I'm gonna shut up now
Well, now that everybody's all hot and bothered, do you want to switch to our topic?
and get hot and bothered again. Oh sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So to remind you guys, this is actually I give away my first one. So if we could each maybe just do one of each game that did this poorly, game that did this well. So this was kind of inspired by Tales of Zestiria. Even though I like the characters, I like the story. One thing that always bothers me in RPGs is when the end boss is like not in the story at all, and all of a sudden there's this guy behind the guy behind the guy, and there's three final bosses, and you never knew it was secretly this guy the whole time. But you know you've never heard of him. And in Tales of Zestiria, it was like they kept talking about this guy Maltellus that you never see, you never have any backstory with. You have all this backstory with this other bad guy, but like I don't want to spoil too much, but and then I feel like the whole point of Tales of Berseria was like, hey, this guy does matter, and here's how he came. But like, if you need a whole nother prequel to explain something that you didn't explain the first time, then you didn't do such a good job. And I can think of two games lately that I felt did this well, and I think the key aspect of it is like I'm also getting tired of saving the world. Like an RPG doesn't have to have a great by great I mean grandiose. It doesn't have to be like the whole world. Like it could be a city's going to get destroyed, or somebody's going to become somebody's going to take over and become emperor. That is awful.
Tri-state
You know,
area. Just save the tri-state area. That's good enough.
yeah. Like, well, I mean, Spider-Man saving New York City, right? Why does anime characters have to save the whole world? Come on. And so Crosscode I probably played recently, and the bad guy, obviously I don't want to spoil too much, but it really just came down to like this guy screwed people over and was doing something criminal, and we're gonna stop it. And that I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but that was kind of just like, the final battle came down to like this guy's not going to get away with what he did to us. And then a game I always want to plug because it is so underrepresented, but the last story was an RPG on the Wii by the Final Fantasy creator, and the plot I feel like is kind of like what Final Fantasy VIII was supposed to be in terms of like kind of like focused on a love story, but there's always in all these games there's always this like secret either a traitor or like this guy was secretly behind it the whole time and maybe he was always bad but you didn't know how bad or whatever. And in this game I kind of saw it coming, but I was also kind of okay with that. There's like there's you didn't see it coming and oh that's a good quest. There's also you didn't see it coming because it doesn't make sense, right? So I'd rather see it coming than not see it coming just because it was stupid. So overall I was really happy with like the mythology of the last story made sense, the characters motivations made sense, um and the ending kind of, especially the endings I feel like sometimes these endings are also short because they're like, well, we kind of lost track of what the heck we were talking about. So notice that I managed to not mention Kingdom Hearts in all this, but that's too easy of a shot, I think.
Oh, don't worry. I think there are just as many bad examples as Kingdom Hearts. So,
but yeah, The Last Story and Crosscode, those were two games that I both thought really did this well.
Yeah, I mean, like, I mean, I hate to tell you this, Derek, because I don't want to like kill your love of JRPGs, but it's just a fact that not many JRPGs have very original stories is the problem.
And I don't mind if it's unoriginal as long as it makes sense. And so
Yeah,
sometimes I think in their desperation to be innovative, they just fall in their own
but I mean
traps.
that's the thing is like if you're hoping for things with like innovative narrative or story, you're really just looking in the wrong genre right now.
And to me,
Because for JRPGs, it's kind of like they sort of they sort of live and die in having that similar story structure. You can't think of many JRPGs uh, that have like an interesting narrative to that degree. Like even off the top of my head, like I can't really think of anything except for uh like the one you mentioned, the last story. Although I haven't really played it enough to get the idea of the main narrative. I mean, like uh, Xenoblade Chronicles One starts off as a revenge story where uh, a close friend of your a close friend of Shulk's dies at the beginning of that plot, and you're just going to fight the main villain army as revenge. And it's like, oh, okay, that's like an interesting setup to what could potentially evolve into a bigger plot. Um, I suppose in my case, like I I honestly haven't played too many JRPGs to completion. The only one that I can really think of where it's like it's about saving the world is Chrono Trigger, long time ago. And like one of my personal favorite games, Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne 3, is kind of an adverse. It's kind of a reversion of that plot. Rather than saving the world, you're fighting to you're fighting for the right to create the new world. And that's sort of like the whole premise of that story. Because just to summarize the premise real quick, um, basically basically the current world is destroyed at the beginning of that game, and then a cataclysmic event called the Conception occurs where demons are now roaming the earth. The world itself has inverted, so you're actually so think of it as like the earth has now folded in itself, and now you're walking around it as if it's on the inside. Like you look up at the sky, you see the sun, you see like what you would think is the sun, but has been replaced by something else entirely. And you can also see like other continents along the side of the sky and above you. And now like you're basically fighting towards a goal where uh, people are trying to gain power to to express their own vision of the new world and are fighting to gain control of that. And you just play this character who has kind of just like fell into this event just by circumstance of being at the same place, and then being given power of your own, and then kind of just deciding like, well, um, what do you want to do? Do you want to follow this person's? Do you want to follow one of these person's path, or maybe just forge your own? And I mean, like, I will say, on reflection, that game story has an issue where like no matter which ending you pick, it's not really your decision. It's sort of like just you going along with someone else's plan, uh, which arguably can be considered a central theme within the Shin Megami Tensei series itself. Uh, but but like Nocturne itself was sort of a departure uh, from what the narrative would usually be for Shimigami from Shimigami Tensei 1 and 2, where although I guess like because the problem is I haven't played those first two. I am planning on fixing that, so bear with me, fans of those franchises. If you think I'm being too much of a fake fan, I do realize that. I will fix that. But Nocturne was just very interesting because it's like it 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 goes for a different type of narrative altogether, which I think is what drew me to that game in the first place. Um, and I mean, I wouldn't call it entirely original. It is just basically uh, subverting what would normally be saving the world, and instead it's just like we're giving you an opportunity to create the new world instead. So yeah, I don't know. Like again, like with JRPGs, it's just very difficult to find those really unique stories that aren't just like a different way of trying to figure out how to save the world. And unfortunately, too, like there are a lot of key elements that I would say are like these are events that must happen within the story of a JRPG that need to be hit as you progress, and then it's just kind of like rinse and repeat um, with a lot of them. So I understand your misgivings with it, Derek, but at the same time, it's sort of like you kind of have to like search a little bit deeper, unfortunately, and not just like play every one that you find. It does require a bit more research, and then like potentially spoiling a bit of the story for yourself to find those unique ones.
I don't know if I'm willing to spoil anything, but you meant two games I want to hit on briefly. You mentioned, have you beaten Xenoblade Chronicles yet?
No, actually, honestly, I still haven't really started. I only just got past like the first couple chapters still.
Well, I'll say two. I'll say something here about that game, about the Switch version, and then tie that in the Chrono Trigger.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the plot of Xenoblade Chronicles One does evolve in a way that makes sense by the end. I didn't feel too much like, hey, this is a bunch of fake nonsense by the end of it. But what's really done well in the Switch version is like my general viewpoint on um, stories in general, not necessarily JRPGs, but video game stories, is that I want the overall plot to make sense. But what I'm really in it for is like I use the phrase quiet moments, like where the characters are talking. If you think about like in FF7R when like there's a place part where you're sleeping, where like everybody sleeps at Aerith's house, and then there's a moment with the character.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually in the Future Connected, which is the epilogue that it comes with the Switch edition of Xenoblade Chronicles, like the heart to hearts that are in that game, they're called quiet moments in that version. and they're very, very good in Future Connected. But I feel like when the overall plot is nonsense, it forces you to diminish the quality of like the quiet moment arcs with the characters, because if they're talking about nonsense, because the arc of the like story and the tension of what they're doing like doesn't jive with the player, those are not gonna go as well.
Oh,
And
you just gave me a horrible flashback to some moments from Xenoblade 2 that I have
yeah,
s-
that's a good
I know there are
example.
a lot of people who love that game, and to their credit, like I'm glad that they can. I personally can't. It's just like there are so many problems with that I have with that game that it's just like it's very difficult for me to um to accept most reasonings for the faults I find with that game.
That's actually a good example of a game where I feel like it really tries to have this melodrama and tension between and these quiet moment heart to heart. I guess think they're called heart to hearts in Xenoblade 2 with characters, but they're somewhat diminished in quality by the kind of nonsense of the plot. However, if you did finish it, if you ever go back and play Torna Country, it is the game that Xenoblade 2 should have been. It is much better.
That's what I've been
Uh,
hearing.
but going back to Chrono Trigger for a minute, in my mind, Chrono Trigger actually, as good as it was and as innovative as it was, I feel like two things about that game kind of ruined this whole arc that I would prefer, and made things that annoy me more popular.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is a silent protagonist, which Dragon Quest already had. Like Chrono Trigger really brought that into the forefront, and I feel like you lose this ability to have these like small character stories or something like skits in the Tales games. If you have a silent protagonist, this doesn't really work. Fire Emblem has kind of made it work in Three Houses, but overall, I'd still rather have an old Fire Emblem like main character that actually has a personality. The other thing that Chrono Trigger kind of screwed up was that it was probably the first RPG to have multiple endings, which was a huge innovation at the time. But you again, if you kind of lose those moments if it's not even dictated like what the characters are really headed towards. So in general, I'm not a fan of multiple endings either for that reason.
Uh,
Okay,
Malachi, did you have anything you wanted to say before I say anything?
Just in relation to the topic as a whole, or
Or yeah, or like just in response to what Derek just said.
I'm done ranting.
yeah, actually, I'm gonna real quick just cite to give a broader point. I'm gonna be the person to bring in the Western examples.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we're properly rounded out now. Um, what I think is important, what you're referring to, is the, the general in general the idea of, I guess going back to the original topic, like, oh, last minute we've changed characters or something. There's like a different boss, and oh, was it you said like expecting it, I think, is important. I think there's a fine line between expecting it. I guess the best way to put it is kind of the signs were there all along. My two favorite examples personally of a game that does that well, of the last minute twist ending, throw you for a loop kind of boss, are probably Spec Ops: The Line and the original Bioshock. Neither of which I'm going to spoil because both of them I think have I Damien might disagree with me, but their entire moments kind of hinge on those. Like the significance of the game hinges on those moments where you find out. But it makes sense because instead of going, there's a guy behind the guy and you've got to fight that guy now, you go, oh, that's why there was this billboard here that had that person on it. That's why there was this phrasing here. And it recontextualizes the entire game in a really neat way to where you're not mad at the final boss. It's kind of neat storytelling because all of a sudden it brings the final boss's story into play within the span of an hour, but it doesn't feel rushed because technically it's been told throughout the entire game. So all that is to say, within storytelling, I like to see context built up nicely over time. Y'all can go back to talking about JRPGs now. That's just my take. So
No, I think I honestly think you bring up a fair point because it's like, um, uh, I think I talked about this before in one of our practice recordings, but just uh, I think Western games, or at least like Western RPGs or just Western games in general, just have a better idea of how to structure a narrative and give more poignance to like key events. Like it seems to kind of be a struggle for Japanese RPGs to like really hit those key moments in their games. Like if you want to talk about like um, the most impactful JRPGs uh, that would arguably have like really strong key moments, like
It's
you
got to
know,
be the end of Disc 1 in Final Fantasy 7, right?
yeah,
I
like
mean,
Final Fantasy 7 is definitely one of them.
And that's like the JRPG moment. Even I know what that is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like Final Fantasy 6 as well.
we were talking about today with somebody else about Dragon Quest 11 ripping off Final Fantasy 6,
Oh,
and
really?
I think,
Wow.
yeah, I don't want to spoil that too much, but
That's a
yeah,
take I haven't heard actually, so that's very interesting. Um, yeah, and I guess like oh boy, going back to Shin Megami Tensei again because like I love talking about that franchise, despite the limited experience I had with it. Um, like Shin Megami Tensei to me, um, it doesn't necessarily break the mold of JRPG narratives all that much. It's still somewhat standard, but it at least takes enough of those elements and gives it its own flavor that it feels unique to other JRPGs. Like I can I could arguably say at least like for many of the past games and for the most part with the mainline SMT franchise, um the story in those games are very unique to most other JRPGs. Like I would argue Strange Journey is one of the more interesting concepts of needing to save the planet because it gives a different backdrop to it um where it's like it's set up where uh basically like this black expanse has appeared in Antarctica and is slowly expanding over time, and any satellite imaging or digital images taken of inside that expanse have shown alternate versions of the real world being shown inside of that. So not only is it a threat, it's also an anomaly altogether. Uh, so not only is it like your job in that game to save the world, but also to figure out what exactly is this anomaly, what's about it, and they take the time to establish everything from the beginning, like who you are, who you're part of, um, how like the team you're working with is supposed to tackle this unknown entity that you have no idea how you're supposed to even solve. You're working with experimental technology that's like, okay, we built these giant land cruisers that can sustain flight for maybe like a couple of minutes before needing to recharge. And you're just going to jump into this black expanse and hopefully you won't die. Um, it like it's very like it's very sci-fi in its uh in like its background establishment, but it's also very interesting as a very typical save the earth uh type of story. Like it's very interesting. It's almost like it's almost as if I'm playing an Armageddon movie in a JRPG format, except there aren't really uh any westernisms in it. Like there's no joking really. Almost everyone's fairly serious about the situation, save for one character. It's a very interesting game, but it's like, at least for that game, it's like the plot is very similar to most other JRPGs, but it does enough with it that it at least feels fresh and it doesn't feel tired in its execution. And like with with the SMT franchise, or the mainline franchise rather, like that's what I like about those games, is that it tries to at least tackle a different feeling, and at least know, and like the writers at least know enough to change it up just enough that it feels fresh from everything else. Whereas like with the Persona series, following the major shift in gameplay and presentation with Persona 3, every every sequel afterwards uh, has been like on the top of everyone's JRPG lists for a long time now, proving like there's something about like the execution of the gameplay and what you do within that world, that makes following that plot very enjoyable, while arguably being like uh, while arguably like falling into the same type of plot structure, which is at the end it's save the world. And for sure, like every one of those games also have a twist final boss nearly at the end that you have to fight your way up to. And I suppose like um, the new direction that the Persona franchise is taking right now, uh, at least like gives people just enough enjoyment, um, that they're fine with the same plot at least. That's really about it. Sorry, my explanation kind of devolved near at the end. I'm trying to work on that, but
No, that makes sense.
yeah.
I get it.
I'm going to try to tie what you both said last together and tell me if this makes sense.
Okay.
So the key thing that I think Sam said that makes this whole thing work is establishing the rules, right? So if you've ever read the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson, he spends a much of time on magic systems, and he really reiterates like, here's what's going on, here's how things work, so that when he twists it at the end, it's like, oh, that does make sense. So to use an analogy here, I think this is just my brain because Malachi's got the Zelda hat on. One thing I really liked about Twilight Princess specifically in Zelda was that you go into a dungeon and you would understand the rules of how to do things, and you would kind of explore. And then when you would get whatever item it was, you'd go back into the main room and you'd be like, holy crap, I interpret everything I'm looking at entirely differently because now I have this item. And I felt like most of the dungeons looked like that. To be able to do that narratively is really kind of like the dream here, right? To have the rules established, but be able to like take this one piece, flip it, and like, oh, now everything's recontextualized, and holy crap, this is so different than I expected, and it makes sense. It sounds like, does that sound like a good analogy for like what you're talking about with Spec Ops: The Line?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's. I agree, and I happen to love Twilight Princess, so
But I
makes
also think it's really hard to do. And if I had I would rather play the first half of a Twilight Princess dungeon and be done than have it recontextualized so that doesn't make any sense. I think that's kind of where I'm at with like this whole thing. Like I would rather
yeah.
play a game that's pretty straightforward, but the plot is good and serviceable and it works for the characters because I really care more about the character interaction and that aspect than a bad attempt to recontextualize it and then you just end up with nonsense.
Yeah, I mean like I mean Derek, if you remember like when we collaborated with Fire Emblem Three Houses, like I think Three Houses does a better job with that typical plot structure, because Fire Emblem in general just like the writers usually just have a better understanding of like how to balance out like these wartime type of stories. Uh, Unfortunately, my issue with Three Houses was just um, like near the end. At least with the route I went with, I know you played the Black Eagles route, which is arguably the best one. Like it, uh, like a lot of the impact felt kind of cheapened when I had to fight the final boss, where it's just like that boss just kind of showed up out of nowhere. Honestly, there wasn't really much of a setup to it. And from what I've heard, what happens in the Black Eagles route, it honestly feels like um, the characters related to that route should probably have been the main villain um, for the other routes at least. Um, if that makes any sense.
I don't want to spoil too much, but I recently played the fourth route,
Mm-hmm.
which is the other side of Black Eagles, and that was a great example of recontextualizing the game for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree that that game kind of like is on both sides of this issue. Where on one side, like the route you went on, it sounds exactly what I'm talking about. Where like, hey, you try to pull this crap out of nowhere, and now it doesn't make sense at the end. However, I don't think that it's annoying, but I feel like that game isn't complete unless you play all four routes. And particularly, I feel like the secret route is the one you should do last. And doing that, the very last end did recontextualize the entire game for me. And I honestly don't know who the villain. I no longer have an opinion on who the real bad guy is because
Yeah,
I was
because
pretty convinced. I
yeah,
was pretty
because the
convinced one
problem
side was wrong.
yeah the problem is with like the majority of the routes in that game, the main villain does just like come out on the final page of the script, and you're just like, oh, okay. I thought I was expecting something else, and then I get this instead. Like,
Well, see, I kind of mean the opposite. That I was very happy with
mm.
the kind of subversion of who's good and who's bad with the
Oh well,
last
no,
route.
no, no. Sorry, I mean uh, like to me, it sounds like with the majority of the routes, like the ending just feels kind of cheap. Whereas with your playthrough, this one particular route had like the best impact out of all of them. That's
I
what it
agree
sounds
with
like
that.
to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I almost feel like if you play, I almost feel like the blue lines and the golden deer are like almost DLC routes, if that makes sense. That kind of support the main two paths, which are Black Eagles both ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like I will say like out of the out of the more recent JRPGs that I had played for the last few years, like I suppose like the best ones that I've had an experience with are a toss up between Persona 5 and Three Houses, although I have issues with those games for for arguably different reasons, but mainly the same reasons, which is the narrative. But that's more of a with Persona 5, it's more of a circumstance with issues I have um, with concerns that I have for uh, the Shin Megami Tensei series as a whole in general. So that's really like a separate issue altogether. But I mean, like the 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 other JRPGs I played before that were Nier Automata, and then before that was Xenoblade 2, and then before that was Tokyo Mirage Sessions. Tokyo Mirage Sessions, I reached the halfway point and just dropped because I was utterly just bored out of my skull. Xenoblade 2 I managed to stick with longer, but that was more because of the parts of the gameplay I enjoyed more rather than the story itself. But then kind of realizing like, man, I have like no interest in the story at all, even near the final point of that game. I did end up picking it up again and just telling myself, okay, like let's just finish it so I can say with a clear conscience and not be argued that I didn't fully finish the story and that I don't know what I'm talking about. Um, but Nier Automata
Is
was like the next game that like honestly left me really satisfied despite the mixed emotions I had at the end of that game. Like um and that's the thing is like Nier Automata is one of those JRPGs where uh the story is unique and uh it is truly like not like most other JRPGs, which is why like uh I say to you again, even though you avoid mature rated games as a rule, I highly encourage you to play that game because it is one of those games that you should pick up specifically for the story. Honestly,
I might if you won't. I'll let you know how it is.
It's on Game Pass. Not that you have an Xbox.
No, that helps me not at all, but I might pick it up anyway. We'll see.
By the way, Samuel, it's not worth playing the whole game again, probably, or it's not even. I should say it's not enough to justify Xenoblade Chronicle 2's.
oh no, I'm
80.
just continuing from my save file that I had
No,
before.
no, no. Well, hold on. I'm getting to my point.
Oh, okay.
There is a point. So you wait. So you haven't beaten Xenoblade 2 yet?
I'm basically at the point where I believe like there's a few more. There's like the rest of the final dungeon I basically have to do, and then I
Okay.
fight the final boss. I think.
There is a moment that you may have not been past yet. There's a moment in Xenoblade 2 that if you've beaten Xenoblade 1, it recontextualizes everything, and
Okay.
it's really cool. If you've not played Xenoblade 1, you probably won't even notice that it happens.
Right.
So it may be, and that's probably that one moment isn't really enough to justify the previous 70 hours.
Yeah, that's the
of Xenoblade
thing.
2.
Like that's what I would argue is like that shouldn't be like that really shouldn't be a thing that makes up for everything I had to put up with beforehand. Like you're talking about a moment in a save file where I have over 100 hours in easily. Like come on, really? Just for that one moment? That's gonna be the saving grace, right?
Well, that whole game took me like
and like
50
the
hours.
thing is, sorry, but like, the thing is, Nier Automata has a lot of references uh and to the previous Nier game, which is like that game came out like over a decade ago. So it's like that's really only those references are really only going to apply to the people who played the previous game, who will recognize those references and what they mean in the context of Nier Automata. But even then, you don't need to know those. You don't need to have played Nier to still appreciate those moments in their own or on their own rather. Like those moments are still very emotional, or I shouldn't say just emotional, impactful on their own because because they carry enough impact along with them anyway. Although I will say a couple of those moments um, I'm a little biased towards because I have listened to the entire soundtrack of the first Nier game, which I I love to death. It's like one of my top favorite video game soundtracks of all time. The composer being Keiichi Okabe, uh, is who is like very well known uh, for his Celtic influenced soundtracks. And like I'm just gonna gush about the Nier soundtrack a little bit right now. Like it's genuinely like one of the most beautiful soundtracks ever composed, ever honestly. And I think I will say that uh, as a soundtrack as a whole, like not just in video games, but just of all time, honestly. I know that's going to be a big claim, but I genuinely feel that strongly about that soundtrack. And I haven't even played that game. That's the thing. I've just listened to the soundtrack, but that's how strongly I felt when I first listened to that soundtrack so long ago. Like I still have it on my computer actually. So
Well, maybe we can do best soundtracks for another week, but we should probably wrap it up here.
I'd be down for
So
that.
I
I really
guess
like soundtracks. Sounds like a good topic for me. So.
so maybe just let us know, maybe not your favorite ending, but your favorite kind of final arc in a game and your least favorite.
yeah. So yeah, we're gonna wrap it up here. Thank you everyone for watching / listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed what you like, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell for notifications when a podcast goes up. And if you want to shoot any questions for us to answer, I would like to do a Q&A eventually. Just because I um, I don't necessarily want to keep doing the news segment for too long. Just I really only want to do it if there's something that's really interesting that comes up, honestly. But yeah, if you have any questions you want us to answer, feel free to leave a comment down below, or as a DM to my personal Twitter account. I know I should probably set up a Twitter account specifically for the podcast, but it's fine. Just go ahead and hit up my personal Twitter account. I'll have that in the description as well. And that'll be it. And take care, guys, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Bye.
See ya.